2 elevators, moving in opposite directions. One carrying the most feared man in Korea downward toward a truth he cannot outrun. The other carrying a stranger upward toward a woman who has been expecting him. And in the nursery between them, a mother feeding her son, calm as still water, with a plan that neither man knows exists. The building does not know yet that it is already on fire. The lobby of Han Empire Tower at 7 a.m. was a study in controlled elegance. Marble floors that reflected everything. Security personnel positioned with the casual precision of people who were never casual. Glass walls that looked out onto a Seoul morning arriving gray and cold and indifferent. A reception desk staffed by 2 women whose professionalism was so complete it functioned as its own kind of armor. Uncle Dre stood near the entrance with his carry-on beside him and his hands in his pockets, and the expression of a man who had decided before he boarded the plane exactly how this morning would go. He was looking at the elevator bank when the doors opened, and Ihan Han walked out. Uncle Dre had seen photographs. He had built a file on this man over 2 years, assembled quietly, carefully, with the methodical patience of someone who understood that information was the only currency that never devalued. He had seen surveillance images and boardroom photographs and one grainy video from a Seoul restaurant that his contact had risked significant personal safety to obtain. None of it had prepared him for the reality of Ihan Han in person. The man crossed the lobby and the lobby reorganized itself around him without anyone deciding to do it. The 2 reception staff became slightly more still. The 3 security personnel near the door shifted their weight incrementally. Even the quality of the morning light coming through the glass walls seemed to recalibrate, as if the building itself was paying attention. He stopped 2 meters from Uncle Dre. They looked at each other. Uncle Dre spoke first. "You look like your father," he said. Not a compliment, not an insult, a statement of identification. The way you name a thing so it cannot pretend to be something else. Something moved behind Ihan's eyes. "Mr. Okonkwo," he said quietly, "we should speak privately." "We should," Uncle Dre agreed. "But first," he tilted his head slightly, "I want to see my niece, and her sons, before any conversation happens. Non-negotiable." A pause so precise it had edges. "Of course," Ihan said. He turned toward the elevator. Uncle Dre picked up his carry-on and followed. 2 of Ihan's men fell into position behind them, not threateningly, not obviously, with the practiced subtlety of people whose job was to be invisible until they were needed. Uncle Dre clocked all 3 of them, the positions, the distances, the hands. He said nothing. In the elevator, going up, neither man spoke. The silence was the kind that 2 people construct together, each building their side of it, testing its load-bearing capacity, deciding what they were willing to say when it ended. Ihan looked straight ahead at the elevator doors. Uncle Dre looked at Ihan's reflection in the polished metal. The man was extraordinary in his composure. Uncle Dre had sat across from presidents. He had negotiated in rooms where the wrong word ended careers and occasionally lives. He had looked into the faces of men who wielded genuine power and assessed them with the accuracy that came from decades of practice. Ihan Han was the most self-contained human being he had ever been in proximity to, and underneath the containment, Uncle Dre saw it, because he was very good at seeing. Something was pulling at the seams. "Good," he thought. "You should be afraid. Before we go further, you need to hear this. You are watching episode 3, and that tells me everything about you. You are the kind of person who needs to know what happens next, who cannot sleep on a cliffhanger. It exists for every person who has ever loved the wrong person for the right reasons. For every woman who has ever had to be strong in a room full of people who were counting on her to break. For every person who has looked at their life and realized the story they thought they were living was not the whole story. Subscribe if you have not. Like this video. Share it right now with someone who thinks they know where this is going, because nobody knows where this is going. Not even the people inside it. Let's continue. Olachi heard them before the door opened. Not because they were loud, they were not loud. Ihan Han did not do loud, and her uncle had learned stillness from decades of operating in spaces where stillness was survival. But she had been listening for them. She had been listening for everything since 5 a.m. when she put the folder back in the drawer and returned to her sons and began the careful construction of what came next. She was in the chair between the two bassinets. Jamin was awake, his dark eyes doing that unfocused searching of newborns who are not yet sure what the world is, but are already very interested in finding out. She had her finger pressed against his palm and he was gripping it with the ferocity that she had already decided was his defining characteristic. Jae-won was asleep, one fist pressed against his cheek. The door opened. Uncle Dre came in first. The sight of him, the familiar breadth of his shoulders, the gray at his temples, the face that had been at every significant moment of her life since she was old enough to remember significant moments, hit her somewhere unguarded, and for just a second her careful composure rippled. He crossed the room and held her face in his hands, and looked at her the way her father would have looked at her, and she allowed herself exactly 5 seconds of that before she straightened. "I'm okay," she said. "You are extraordinary," he said. "Your father would—" He stopped, pressed his lips together, looked at Jae-min in her arms and then at Jae-won in the bassinet. The calculation on his face, love and grief and fury and strategic assessment all running simultaneously, was something she recognized because she had been running the same calculation herself for 2 hours. She looked past him. Ihan was standing in the doorway. He was looking at her with an expression she had never seen on his face in 2 years. Not the emptiness from the corridor last night. Not the composure from the lobby. Something raw. Something that knew it was being judged and could not entirely hide that it minded. She held his gaze. "Close the door," she said. He did. The 4 of them, and the 2 boys who were too new to understand they had been born into the middle of something enormous, existed in the room together. "Sit down," Olachi said. To both of them. Neither man sat immediately. There was a brief moment where the instinct of 2 powerful people to remain standing competed with the request of the woman in the chair who was, in this moment, the most powerful person in the room, and all 3 of them knew it. They sat. She did not cry. She did not rage. She did not perform any of the emotions that were entirely justified and were moving through her like weather systems. The grief, the fury, the vertigo of a world rebuilt on a false floor. She had felt all of those things. She would feel them again, but right now she needed something that had served her better than feeling in every hard moment of her life. She needed clarity. "I want to say something," she said, "and I want both of you to listen completely before either of you speaks." Uncle Dre nodded. Ihan was very still. "I know about my father," she said. She watched Ihan's face, watched the precise and total absence of surprise, which was itself a confirmation. He had been waiting for this. He had known she would find out, and he had been waiting. "I know about the acquisition offer. I know about the refusal. I know about the document." She paused. "I found the file." The room was so quiet she could hear Jae-won breathing. "I have known since 5 a.m., she said. "I sat next to my sons for 2 hours and I thought about every possible version of what I could do with what I know. Every version." She looked at Ihan directly. "And then I made a decision." Ihan spoke for the first time since entering the room, very quietly. "Olachi," I said, "listen." He closed his mouth. The fact that he closed his mouth, that Ihan Han, the man who controlled everything his gaze touched, who made governments careful and crime organizations cautious, who had never in his professional life been told to be quiet and complied. The fact that he closed his mouth was not lost on her uncle, who filed it away with the focused precision of a man who assessed everything. "I am not leaving Seoul," she said. Uncle Dre's head turned sharply. "I am not getting in a car to an airport. I am not being compensated. I am not disappearing into a life in Lagos with my son's pictures on a shelf in a building their father controls but never visits." She looked at Jae-min in her arms, at his small, perfect face. "I am also not pretending that what I found in that file does not exist. I am not performing forgiveness I do not feel, and I am not making any permanent decisions about my future or my son's future based on the emotions of the last 12 hours. She looked at Ihan. "You owe me truth," she said. "Complete truth. Everything, from the beginning, why you approached me, what you intended, what changed, all of it." She held his gaze. "And then I will decide what I do with it." Silence. "And Uncle Dre," she turned to him. "I love you. I know why you came. But whatever you were planning to do in this building, whatever you had in mind when you got on that plane, you will stand it down. For now. My father showed me your father's file when I was 17, he said. He was leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. Another thing she had never seen, that particular posture of a man who has put down his armor because he no longer has the energy to hold it up. Chukwemeka Okonkwo. He presented it to me the way he presented every strategic problem, as mathematics. This man is building something that will cost us these corridors. This is what must be done. He paused. He was training me. Every significant organizational decision he made in those years, he walked me through. The reasoning, the calculus, what we gain, what we lose, what is necessary. And my father, Olachi said. Her voice was level. Was he necessary? Ihan looked at her. To him, yes. To you? A long pause. I was 19. I had grown up in a world where my father's logic was the only logic I had ever been given. I did not question it. He stopped. Something crossed his face that she had no word for. I signed the document. I gave the order. I was not present for the execution itself. I don't know if that matters to you. It doesn't, she said quietly. No, he said. I didn't think it would. Uncle Dre had not moved or spoken. His face was a controlled study in a man who was listening with every part of himself and feeling a great deal and showing almost none of it. Lagos, Olachi said. Tell me about Lagos. Ihan was quiet for a moment. 6 years ago, he said, I began reassessing things my father had built. The organization, the decisions, the ones I had inherited and the ones I had made. He chose his next words carefully. There are things I have done, Olachi, that I cannot undo. I know that. But there are also things I spent years trying to understand differently. Your father's file was one I returned to. More than once, because it was the first order I gave. Because he was not what my father told me he was. He was just a man building something for his family. He paused. I located his family. Years later, I had your file built, not as surveillance. As, I don't know what to call it. Accountability, trying to understand what I had taken. And then you arranged to meet me, she said. Yes. Why? He looked at her for a long time. I don't know, he said. Entirely. I told myself it was closure, that I wanted to understand who you were, what your life had become, whether, he stopped, whether you were all right. Whether I was all right, she repeated. The words tasted strange. You wanted to check if the girl whose father you killed had turned out all right. Yes. And then what happened? He looked at her with that expression, the one with no armor in it, the one she had seen for the first time in the nursery when he held J1. You threatened a man twice your size with a broken bottle, he said. And you did not shake once. And I... Something moved through his face. It was not the plan. None of what happened after that was the plan. You fell in love with me, she said, flatly, not a question, not an accusation. Yes, he said, while knowing who I was. Yes. And you never told me. No. She looked at him for a long time. At this man who had walked into her life carrying a debt she didn't know existed and had somehow, impossibly, infuriatingly, devastatingly, become the person she had built her world around. I hate you, she said quietly. I know, he said. And I don't, she said. At the same time, which is the worst part. He said nothing. Because there was nothing to say to that. It was simply true. Uncle Dre speaks. He had been silent for 20 minutes. When he finally spoke, his voice was very controlled. You are telling me, he said to Ihan, that you located Chukwemeka's daughter, inserted yourself into her life, built a relationship, had children with her, and at no point in 2 years did you tell her the truth. Yes, Ihan said. And you thought this was acceptable? No, Ihan said. I thought it was inevitable. There is a difference. Uncle Dre looked at him for a long moment. I spent 20 years wanting to find the man who gave that order, he said. I had a very specific idea of what I would do when I did. He glanced at Olachi, then back to Ihan. Your daughter, he caught himself. My niece has asked me to stand down. I'm standing down, for now. The last 2 words landed with exact deliberate weight. But I want you to understand something, Ihan. Very clearly. Ihan met his eye. The only reason you are having a conversation in this room instead of a very different kind of encounter, Uncle Dre said quietly, is because of that woman. And those two boys. The debt you owe this family does not disappear because you have complicated feelings. It does not disappear because your love is real. You owe a debt, and debts are paid. The room was very quiet. I know, Ihan said. This is the part of the story nobody was ready for. While Ihan was in the nursery speaking truths he had never spoken before, and while Uncle Dre was sitting with the particular controlled fury of a man who has chosen patience as a weapon, while all of this was happening, a second elevator arrived on the medical floor. The man who stepped out of it was Korean, mid-30s, well-dressed in the way that people who have grown up around money are well-dressed, not showy, simply correct. He had a visitor pass that had been issued not by Han Tower's reception but by a separate security system that ran parallel to Han Tower's infrastructure and was known only to a very specific category of people. He walked down the corridor toward the nursery. He stopped outside the door. He did not knock. He waited. His phone buzzed. He read the message, looked up at the door. Something crossed his face. The expression of a man who has been preparing for a moment for a very long time and is now inside the moment and finding it more complicated than the preparation suggested. He put his phone away. He knocked. Olachi opened it. The moment she saw him, her face did something it had not done once in the entire preceding conversation. It showed surprise. Genuine, uncontrolled, for exactly 1 second before she mastered it. "You're early," she said. "Your timeline moved up," he said. His voice was warm and careful. He glanced past her into the room, found Ihan. The two men looked at each other, and the quality of that look was the kind that carries entire histories, complicated, old, unresolved. Ihan stood up. "Seo Junho," he said, very quietly, in the tone he used when something had just confirmed a suspicion he had been carrying. "Ihan," the man said. He looked at Olachi. "I'm sorry I couldn't come sooner." "You're here now," she said. She stepped back to let him in. Ihan was looking between them with an expression that was doing something she had never seen his face do, assembling a picture from pieces he had not known were connected. The calculation happening behind his eyes was visible in a way that Ihan's calculations never were. "How do you know each other?" he said. Not a question. Olachi looked at him steadily. "Seo Junho," she said, "has been my contact inside the Han organization for 14 months. The silence that followed had a physical weight. "Your contact," Ihan repeated. "My source," she said. "My proof." She let that settle. "You were not the only one building a file, Ihan." Uncle Dre leaned back in his chair very slightly, recalibrating. "Olachi." Ihan's voice was extremely quiet, the very quiet that his organization feared most, the quiet that came just before something irreversible. "What have you been doing?" She picked up Jae-min from the bassinet, held her son against her chest, looked at the father of her children across a room that had just shifted completely on its axis. "What I have always done," she said. "Protecting my clients." She paused. "In this case, myself. You built a case against me. I built a record," she said, "of everything, the file, the order, your father's decisions and your decisions, everything Seo Junho could access and document and verify." She held his gaze. "Not to destroy you, Ihan, not to go to the authorities, not even to expose you." She paused, "as insurance, as the thing that meant you could never, ever make me disappear, or my sons, or my uncle, as the thing that gave me a seat at a table." The room was completely still. "You planned this," he said. "I prepared," she said. "There is a difference." She echoed his own words back at him with the precision of a woman who had been listening carefully for a very long time. "You taught me that, actually, in Seoul. You told me once, the only position of safety is the one where you hold something the other person cannot afford to lose. You were talking about a business negotiation, but I was listening." Ihan looked at her. This woman who had walked into his plan and become something his plan had no framework for, who had smiled at him for 14 months while building her own architecture around his, who had given him sons and love and the first genuine emotional truth of his adult life, and who had also, quietly, methodically, while growing his children inside her body, been building the walls that would keep her safe from him. He sat back down, very slowly, and something happened on his face that Seo Jun-ho and Uncle Dre both witnessed and would remember and would never fully be able to describe. It was not defeat. It was not anger. It was the expression of a man who has spent his entire life being the most prepared person in every room, encountering for the first time someone who had out-prepared him, and feeling, underneath the shock of it, something that in another life, in a simpler story, might have looked almost like pride. "What do you want?" Ihan said. "That's a very cold way to ask," Olachi said. "What do you want, Olachi?" Slightly different, the name carrying something the sentence didn't. She sat down, adjusted Jae-min against her shoulder. He made a small sound of protest and then settled. "My sons carry both names," she said. "Han Okonkwo, both, on every document, in every context, non-negotiable." He nodded once. "I am their mother in every room, every official capacity, every family context. I am not a background figure. I am not a secret. I am not a colleague. I am the mother of Han heirs, and I am acknowledged as such." Another nod. "I retain my professional independence, my work, my clients, my autonomy. You do not interfere with my professional life in any capacity without my explicit agreement." "Agreed?" "My uncle," she glanced at Uncle Dre, "has safe passage, always, in and out of any Han territory, any Han building, without surveillance or interference." A pause, longer this time. She watched Ihan's jaw work slightly. Letting her uncle move freely through his organization's geography was a significant concession. She let the pause sit. She did not fill it. "Agreed," he said finally. "And Seo Jun-ho." She looked at the man standing near the door who had risked everything to help her. "Is untouchable. Whatever your feelings about what he did, he is untouchable. His position in the organization is secure and his family is protected." Ihan looked at Seo Jun-ho. The look of a man working through a complicated equation involving betrayal and loyalty, and the particular calculus of a person who did something wrong for reasons that were not wrong. "Agreed," he said, very quietly. "And you," she said. She looked at him directly. "Tell me the truth, going forward, everything. If I ask you something, you answer. No more files I find by accident. No more truths that arrive through phone calls from my uncle at midnight. If we are going to exist in any kind of proximity, as parents, as whatever we are to each other, you tell me the truth." The longest pause of all. "That is the hardest one," he said honestly. "I know," she said. "That's why I saved it for last." He looked at her for a long time, at the woman holding his son, at the woman who had sat in a nursery at 5 a.m. having just found out the worst thing he had ever done, and had chosen strategy over collapse, at the woman who had looked at the most feared man in Korea across a room full of people who were afraid of him, and told him to sit down. "Yes," he said. "Truth." "Good," she said. The meeting ended. Uncle Dre stood, straightened his suit, looked at Ihan with the expression of a man who has accepted a ceasefire without forgetting that a ceasefire is not peace. He kissed Olachi's forehead. Held J1 for a long, careful moment, put him back. "I'll be at the hotel," he said. "Call me. Anything, anytime." He left. Seo Jun-ho met Olachi's eyes. A long look that communicated gratitude and relief and something else, something that had weight and history and that she acknowledged with a small nod. He left too. And then it was just them. Ihan and Olachi and two sleeping boys in a room that had seen more truth in the last 2 hours than most rooms see in a lifetime. He moved to the bassinet, looked at J1, did not touch him, just looked, in the way she had noticed he did when he thought nobody was watching, like a man trying to understand something new through sustained attention. "I don't know how to do this," he said. He was not looking at her. He was looking at his son. Any of it. Be a father. Be... He stopped. "Be the kind of person you deserve to have next to you." "I know," she said. "I'm going to do it wrong." "Probably," she agreed. "Often." "Yes." He turned then and looked at her. "And you'll tell me." "Every time," she said. Something that was not quite a smile and was more significant than a smile moved across his face. "Okay," he said. She looked at this man, this impossible, complicated, dangerous, tender, broken, trying man, and felt the full weight of everything they were to each other. The history they could not change, the sons they had made, the future that was not simple and would not be easy and would require more from both of them than either of them fully understood yet. "Okay," she said. He crossed the room and stood in front of her, looked down at her in the chair with Jae-min sleeping against her chest, reached out, slowly, giving her time to move away, and put his hand against the side of her face. She did not move away. "I'm sorry," he said. "For your father, for the years you grew up without him, for the file, for last night, for all of it." He held her gaze. "I know that's not enough." "No," she said softly. "It's not. But it's true." 3 floors below the nursery, in a Seoul coffee shop with a direct sightline to Han Empire Tower's main entrance, a man sits with a cup of tea he has not touched. He is in his late 50s, Nigerian. His face carries the particular geography of a man who has lived hard in hidden places. On the table in front of him is a single photograph. It is a photograph of Olachi, not recent. This photograph is from Lagos, before Seoul, before Ihan Han. On the back of the photograph, in handwriting that is not his own, 4 words have been written: "Bring her home." Finally. He turns the photograph face down, picks up his phone, dials. "She knows I'm here," he says when the line connects. A pause. "Not yet," the voice on the other end says. "Good," he says. "Keep it that way. I need 3 more days." He hangs up, finishes his tea, and looks up at the tower with the expression of a man who has been patient for 15 years and has decided that his patience has finally run out. The question that episode 4 will answer: who sent him? Who wrote those 4 words on the back of that photograph? And what does bringing Olachi home actually mean? Safety, or something that wraps itself in the language of family and is something else entirely underneath? And why, when her uncle gets the call about the second Okonkwo in Seoul, does he go completely silent for 11 seconds before he says, "Don't let Olachi out of that building"?